Welcome back. My next guest oversaw a U.S. government-backed report from Yale University, which documents the detention of thousands of Ukrainian children in so-called re-education camps in Russia. The primary purpose is to erase their identity and turn them pro-Russian. At least 6,000 Ukrainian children, a number Ukraine believes is closer to 16,000, have been forcibly removed to Russia and spread across at least 43 camps and facilities. The report says children have been taken from orphanages or raped from their parents with promises that they'll be returned, but that those return dates have either been delayed or suspended indefinitely. Nathaniel Raymond is the executive director at the Yale Humanitarian Research Lab, and he joins me now. Nathaniel, children being subjected to Russian propaganda, or as is written in your report, political re-education, is eerily reminiscent of a very well-documented policy of the Nazi regime. Is that what's going on here?
It's exactly what's going on here, and it's important to remind your viewers that the first trials at the Nuremberg Tribunal after World War II were specifically for this crime of what is codified in the 1998 Rome Statute and the Genocide Convention as transfer of children from one group to another for purposes of eliminating their national or ethnic identity. During the Nazi period, it was called Germanification. Here it's called Russification, and the means and methods are exactly the same.
We're talking about children between the ages of 4 months old and 17 years old. What does that curriculum look like, and what about military training?
Well, I'll take the second part first. In terms of military training, we present in this report irrefutable evidence that in at least 2 camps, one in Russia-occupied Crimea and the other in the Chechen Republic, boys from ages of 14 to 17 are receiving firearms training and training in operating military vehicles. That violates the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It also violates the Geneva Convention. In general, at the 41 re-education facilities we identify, what we're seeing is can simply be described as Russian patriotic education, which includes tours of historic, often military battle sites, education in Russian folk tales, and actually singing Russian songs. Now, that may seem innocuous, but you have to understand that these children are not allowed to speak Ukrainian. Their phones have been taken, and their parents, in many cases, are traveling over 70 hours to try to find where they are and retrieve them in many cases.
In terms of propaganda, we know that the Russians are willing to lie to the world. How is this being spun there?
It's not being spun all that much. It's really important to understand that the main audience here for the re-education program is an internal Russian domestic audience. 48 hours after our report was released, President Putin himself, with Maria Lvova-Belova, whose face I think is behind you on the screen, who's leading the program for the Kremlin, met in a press interview or press availability and basically said they're going to expand the program and add 2,000 Russian Ukrainian youth to the military training program alone. So they're not only not hiding this is part of a broader effort to rebrand the invasion as a humanitarian project and to position Russia as claiming that they're saving these children.
I mean, apart from political re-education, why would Russia want to steal Ukrainian children?
There's 3 reasons. One is the political re-education for this purpose of returning to Ukraine pro-Russian children. Second is basically that they are bargaining chips in a very dangerous poker game in any future prisoner exchange negotiations with Ukraine or negotiations on ending the war. People say to me all the time, what are you most worried about? Is it nuclear weapons? Is it this or that? What I'm most worried about has already happened, which is that these children are basically in a hostage situation. The third objective here is really that political communication to a Russian domestic audience. And we saw that vividly and horrifically, I believe, yesterday with Putin's rally in the main arena in Moscow, where Russian soldiers who had attacked Mariupol and in some cases killed, it's believed, thousands of civilians, including attacking a maternity hospital, took children onto stage, including one girl who was asked to thank the Russians who took her. She was crying and said that she couldn't say the script because she had forgotten the words. But basically, they are using them as performance pieces.
Unbelievable. I mean, what happens after the war, particularly to kids who've had their name changed if there's no log? Or how about the 4-month-old child who doesn't know his or her own identity? How do you get them back? What kind of a difficult challenge would that be?
So this is personally something that I have experience with, having been involved in an operation to support DNA identification of children in Guatemala, El Salvador, and elsewhere in Central America who had been taken during civil wars in the 80s and put into the US adoption system illegally. It took us decades in DNA identification to be able to reunite them with their surviving family members. Why this report is so important for me personally is I do not want to see that happen here. And so that's why yesterday at the United Nations, I made very clear to the member states 4 critical points. We need registration of these children now. Second, they need communication. They need to be able to call home. Third, we need international monitors, such as the Red Cross and UN agencies, on the ground now in these camps. And fourth, they need to be transferred to a third-party neutral country, as the Geneva Convention requires, so that they do not end up being hostages in a bargaining effort by the Russians.
Before I let you go, we heard it from the US president, talk of genocide. There's mountains of evidence of crimes against humanity. This we know. But is there a world in which, in reality, Putin and those involved are actually brought to justice for these crimes?
Well, I've been a war crimes investigator nearly 24 years. And as I tell my team and my colleagues all the time, never underestimate the ability for what happens next to surprise you. Often you think people are never going to face justice, who do. In Bosnia, we thought Mladic, Karadzic, and Milosevic would never be tried, and they were convicted. So at the end of the day, I'm an investigator. I am not a prosecutor. Whether or not they're convicted falls to the courts and to the international community. But I'll tell you this, justice is a process, and that process has begun here. How it will end, we'll all see. But at the end of the day, it's really incumbent upon the international community to focus on the first step, which is registration. There's much we don't know here, but we know that the 6,000 number is probably significantly larger. We know that the 43 number of facilities is probably significantly larger. Right now, we have several dozen additional facilities under investigation, and we expect that number to rise.
Absolutely stunning. Nathaniel, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Don't go away.